You won't believe what just happened in the world of gospel music. Marvin Winans, a name that's been respected for decades in churches, award shows, and gospel playlists, suddenly stepped away from it all. This wasn't just a retirement. No farewell tour, no slow transition, no years of planning it out publicly. No, this decision came with whispers, with hidden pain, and with a truth that only now is beginning to surface. And let me tell you, this isn't just about one man leaving his position. This is about a journey that tested his faith, shook his identity, and revealed the silent battles pastors fight behind the pulpit. The Gospel Royalty, the Winans legacy. To understand why Marvin's decision shook so many people, you've got to start with the family he comes from. The Winans aren't just another gospel group, they're gospel royalty. Their music defined generations. Their harmonies carried people through heartbreak, doubt, and struggle. Marvin, along with his brothers Carvin, Michael, and Ronald, helped form the Winans, a Grammy-winning group whose songs like Tomorrow and Ain't No Need to Worry didn't just chart, they ministered. These weren't just tracks to play on a Sunday morning. They were lifelines. For people sitting in hospitals, prison cells, or their living rooms, wondering if life was worth continuing, Marvin's voice was like a thread of hope. He didn't just sing gospel, he lived it. And people didn't just hear him, they felt him. That's what made his sudden exit even more shocking. Because when someone who seemed so devoted, so successful, and so unshakable suddenly steps away, you have to ask, what happened? But beyond music, the pastor emerges. Marvin's influence didn't stop at music. He took his faith to a whole new level when he founded Perfecting Church in Detroit. For more than 30 years, Marvin was more than a pastor. He was a guide, a spiritual father, a leader. Week after week, thousands packed into that church to hear him preach. And it didn't stop there. His sermons were streamed online, his conferences drew people from across the country, and his name carried weight far beyond Detroit. Perfecting wasn't just a church, it was a movement, a spiritual home for people who felt lost, and a rallying point for those hungry for revival. From the gospel stage to the pulpit, Marvin Winans looked untouchable, but behind closed doors, a different reality was forming. There were hidden struggles, health and heartbreak. The truth is, even the strongest leaders carry invisible battles, and Marvin was no different. Health issues began creeping in, quietly, slowly, the kind of struggles you can hide from the cameras, but not from yourself. The man who once had boundless energy to travel, preach, and lead began to feel his body resist. Standing to deliver a sermon required effort. Singing required strength he didn't always have. Nights of rest turned into nights of pain. And yet, the world never saw it. Marvin smiled, preached, sang, and carried others, while hiding the weight on his own shoulders. And then came the heartbreaks. In 2005, Marvin lost his brother Ronald Winans, not just a sibling, but a spiritual partner and musical confidant. That death tore through him like nothing else. Over the years, more losses followed. Family, mentors, friends. Each one left another scar. These weren't just moments of grief. They were life-altering blows. They forced Marvin to question how he wanted to spend the years he had left. Of the whisper of change. Even as the world saw a strong pastor and gospel icon, inside Marvin, something was shifting. The joy of preaching began to fade into fatigue. The fire that once lit up the pulpit dimmed. He started asking himself questions he never thought he'd ask. Is it time to let go? Am I still giving them my best? Or am I holding on too long? For a man who had always been the one with answers, feeling this kind of uncertainty was terrifying. But no matter how much he tried to push it away, the whisper of change kept getting louder. Here's the turning point. The final push came one Sunday morning. Marvin stood at the pulpit of Perfecting Church, looking out at the thousands of faces staring back at him. Faces that had trusted him for decades, faces that had leaned on him through their darkest hours. But that day, something felt different. For the first time in years, he felt disconnected. Not because he didn't love them, but because his heart was no longer fully there. That realization broke him. He went home, sat in silence, and cried. Not because he was weak, but because he knew what God was asking of him. And finally, the decision became clear. It was time to step down. The announcement. When Marvin finally told his congregation, the room went still. Shock spread like a wave. People couldn't process what they were hearing. This wasn't just any pastor. This was Marvin Winans, the man who had built their spiritual home, who had walked them through funerals, weddings, and Sunday mornings filled with hope. The thought of him stepping away felt like the ground was shifting beneath their feet. But Marvin's words carried more than resignation. They carried love. He made it clear. This wasn't the end. It was a transition. He wasn't abandoning them. He was passing the torch so the church could grow even stronger under new leadership. He wanted Perfecting to thrive beyond him, to prove that the ministry was never about one man, but about God's plan. Through the faith behind the move. Here's the part that many people missed. Marvin's decision wasn't just about health or pressure. It was about faith. All his life, Marvin had believed God's plan for him was fixed. Preach, sing, serve. But slowly, he realized that faith isn't a straight line. It's a journey. And sometimes that journey requires leaving behind what's comfortable to step into the unknown. So when Marvin said he was stepping down, he wasn't quitting. He was following a new call. What comes next? Now the big question, what's next for Marvin Winans? Well, Marvin gave us hints. For one, music, his first love. With the church in capable hands, Marvin now has space to return to the stage. Fans are already buzzing about possible albums or collaborations. His voice, the voice that carried millions through storms, may rise again in a new season. Then there's mentorship. Marvin has decades of wisdom to pass on. He's spoken about guiding younger gospel artists, not just in their craft, but in their faith. Imagine the impact of Marvin Winans pouring into the next generation of worship leaders. And there's even talk of a book. After all, his story is filled with lessons about endurance, faith, grief, and hope. A book would let him share not just his triumphs, but the valleys he had to walk through. He is the man who chose to evolve. So here's the truth. This isn't a story of decline. It's not the tale of a man who lost his way or crumbled under the pressures of leadership. No. This is a story of renewal. Marvin Winans isn't fading. He's evolving. Think about it. For over 3 decades, Marvin carried the weight of a congregation, the reputation of a legendary gospel family, and the expectations of an entire music industry. People saw him as a rock, steady, unshakable, always ready with a word of encouragement or a song of hope. And in many ways, he was exactly that. But even rocks can grow weary. Even giants need rest. Stepping away wasn't an admission of failure. It was an act of courage. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do in life is let go. Not because you've run out of strength, but because you've realized that true strength comes in surrender. Marvin chose to step aside before burnout forced him to. He chose to make space for new voices, new leaders, and new energy to rise in the church he built from the ground up. That takes humility, that takes faith, and it takes a man secure enough in his calling to know that his legacy doesn't depend on holding the microphone forever. Yes, the decision broke hearts. Yes, it shocked his congregation. People cried, people questioned, people wondered how things could ever be the same. But that grief only proves how deeply he was loved, how much his presence mattered, how much of himself he poured into every sermon, every song, every prayer. But here's the beautiful part. Marvin's story doesn't end here. This chapter may be closing, but the next one, it's already being written. Whether it's through music, mentorship, or a book that shares the lessons of his journey, Marvin still has so much more to give. He's just giving it in a different way now. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. Life isn't about clinging to one role forever. It's about recognizing when a season has run its course and having the faith to embrace what comes next. Marvin Winans showed us that evolution isn't weakness, it's wisdom. So when people look back on his life, they won't just see a Grammy-winning singer or a powerful pastor. They'll see a man who had the courage to follow faith wherever it led, even when it led away from the spotlight. That's not the end of a story. That's the start of a new one. And that's the legacy of Marvin Winans. Not just a pastor, not just a singer, but a man who knew that sometimes the holiest act isn't in holding on. It's in letting go. Outro. The story continues. And that's the journey of Marvin Winans, a man who shocked the gospel world, not by falling, not by failing, but by making one of the most courageous choices of his life. He stepped down, not because he lost faith, but because he chose to trust it even more. Think about that for a second. Most people spend their lives clinging tightly to what they've built, afraid to let it go. But Marvin reminded us that sometimes faith means releasing control. Sometimes it means trusting that the seeds you've planted will keep growing, even if you're not the one watering them anymore. For decades, Marvin's voice filled churches and concert halls. His sermons lifted broken hearts. His music became the soundtrack of hope for people who didn't know if they could make it to tomorrow. He gave everything he had, his time, his energy, his spirit. And now, instead of watching him burn out, we're watching him take a step of wisdom. That's not weakness, that's leadership. The truth is that Marvin's story isn't over, it's only changing chapters. Whether through music, mentorship, or simply being a guiding voice in the background, his influence isn't going anywhere. In fact, this new chapter might be the most powerful yet, because it's not about holding on to a pulpit or a platform. It's about showing us all how to evolve with grace. So what do you think? Did Marvin make the right decision by stepping away when he did? Was it the ultimate act of faith to trust God with the next season of his life? And more importantly, what do you hope to see from him now? More music, a book, mentorship, or maybe something completely unexpected? Whatever comes next, one thing is certain. Marvin Winans has never been a man who plays small. If history tells us anything, it's that his impact will keep reaching people in ways we can't yet imagine. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to hear what you think about Marvin's next chapter. And of course, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little inspiration, and subscribe for more untold stories from the world of faith and music. Because Marvin's story reminds us of this simple truth: faith doesn't end when a chapter closes. It only continues.